All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on this beautiful Saturday morning. Today's class is about irrigation basics for a sustainable landscape. We're going to have John Winslow teaching the class. So just some housekeeping items. The class will be about 45 minutes with 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. We ask you to please enter your questions into the Q&A box, or you can chat with us directly. You can send me or John a question or a message in the chat box. SCV Water, who are we? We are a full-service regional water agency located in the Santa Clarita Valley. We provide water to over 273,000 people. And if you didn't know, we are in a drought. We have moved into stage 2 of our drought water, our contingency plan. If you have an odd address, you can only water Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. If you have an even address, please only water Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, and no watering for anybody on Saturdays. And then you do have a 10-minute max per day, but to better use your water, we suggest you do 5 minutes in the morning and then 5 minutes in the evening to, maintain your lawn alive. So save water and money with our rebate programs. We're going to be discussing those a little bit today. You go to conserve.yourscvwater.com, and we do have several rebates for residential and commercial customers. We do have some landscape resources for you. We have plant guides, we have watering guides, watering device types, where we discuss all that on our website. So if you miss something from today's presentation, go on our website and check us out there that you can use. The Water Smart Workshop, we still have this. You get $20 for completing the program on your water bill. And it's great for you because you can learn how to read your water bill, identify and fix leaks, as well as other common home water issues, which during drought, it means a lot to you and us. So $20. We do have a smart irrigation controller rebate up to $150. They will be going over some irrigation for sustainable landscaping, and this is something you might be interested in. So go on our website and you can get more information and the application for that. We also have the landscape replacement program. You can earn up to $3 per square foot for removing your lawn. And we have the HELP program for healthy and efficient landscapes. You can get up to $750 for that, and you can upgrade your irrigation hardware for like drip irrigation, which John will be covering today, and high efficiency nozzles and pressure regulation. So it's something you might want to consider if you are considering updating your irrigation systems. So we will be on Zoom through the end of this year. Hopefully next year we could return in person, and we could all meet each other and learn from John and our other instructors. Connect with us, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. Our classes are on YouTube. So if today's class you miss it, it'll be available within a week on YouTube. Our next gardening class will be on June 11th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and we'll be discussing managing soils and fertilizers in the Santa Clarita Valley. All right, so that's it for me. I'm gonna give it away to John. At the end, I will be coming back to ask the questions to John. John, do you want to pull up your presentation? Share your screen.
Yes, ma'am.
And while you do that, somebody asked about the watering in the evenings. You can water before 9 a.m. and after 8 p.m. So you're just gonna have to look at the schedule. I'll put that in the chat for you. But I'm gonna give it away to John.
Okay, good morning, folks. And I guess this is a very timely class because many of you have probably already received your notifications about the new irrigation guidelines. Now, we are in a drought, and we've been in droughts before. We've all been down this road before. And some of the things you're going to learn today are going to help you to get through it. So we're going to jump right into it with the principles of irrigation that we're going to be talking about throughout this class. And that very first line there, water deeply but infrequently, is so important. I talk to people all day long, and so many of them are watering 3 minutes twice a day. That is the exact opposite of what plants need and want, and it's the exact opposite of what we're trying to teach you. So just remember those 4 words, and you'll do so much better. We want to thoroughly water the plants, then we want to walk away. The water, every time you water, it pushes oxygen out of the soil. Plants can't live without the oxygen in the soil. So after you water, you've got to go a long period of time so that the air can get back in the soil before you water again. Secondly, put the water where you want it. Water the root zone of the trees, the plants, the flowers. Don't put water where you don't need it. If a sprinkler system works well for a lawn, that's great, but it might not work well for individual shrubs or flowers. Okay? When you place water at the base of a plant, the base of a small tree or a shrub, the water will go right down and it moves a little bit laterally in the soil. But we don't want a whole lot of movement at the top. Okay? It should be applied only as fast as the water can be absorbed by the soil. Sandy soils can absorb the water quickly. You'll almost get no pooling whatsoever. A heavy clay soil or a compacted soil may not absorb it as fast. And if that happens, you'll get runoff. And we avoid that by using the repeat cycle on our sprinklers. With drip irrigation, I don't believe it'll ever be a problem with runoff. Okay, so these are the main components of your system. And perhaps the most important thing is the thing right there at the top called the controller. You can control the controller. You can program, and you'll have to go out after this class and program the controller to come on even days or odd days and for the times allotted. So that's the important thing. The controller does just exactly that. It controls everything else. Hopefully you don't have to get into any of the other parts of this system. Perhaps, maybe, the sprinkler heads. You may need to replace some sprinkler heads that are perhaps shooting too far, not shooting far enough, and that's a pretty easy fix, but we'll talk about that. So the controller, the clock in the garage typically, sends an electronic signal to the valve. The valve turns the water on and off for the number of minutes and on the days that your controller is set for. When the valve goes on, the water flows through the pipes and goes through the sprinkler heads. If you're installing a new sprinkler system, these other things, the gate valves, the ball valves, all that will be of importance to you. If you have an existing system and you're just trying to get it to be a little bit more precise, those things probably won't be of much importance to you. Now, typically, a small residential yard will have a main line that is the same size as the valve. In this case, 3/4 inch is pretty standard. And the 3/4 inch will run through the entire property. Then at the individual sprinkler areas, a 1/2 inch riser will come up out of the ground and a sprinkler will be attached to that. Like I say, if you're installing new or having to tear things out, then the rest of this slide will help you with that. But I think for most of us, we're probably just going to be concerned about the controller and the individual sprinklers for right now. Okay, if you're installing a new system, you'll need to know all the other parts. You'll need to know about the fittings. You'll need to know about the glue, everything like that. It's a process. But we're going to go back to the controller because that's the most important part. Some of the new controllers are called smart controllers, and they use sensors that are connected to a nearby weather station to determine how long to run the actual sprinklers. The repeat cycle that we spoke about, if you have heavy clay soils or compacted soil, that's important. I believe that Laura told us that we're allowed to water up to 10 minutes with sprinklers on our watering day. If you can't water 10 minutes at a time because the water will run off, you could do 5 minutes at the beginning of your time frame and 5 minutes towards the end and get that whole 10 minutes on there. So there's many different types of clocks, and of course we can't go through them all. But I can tell you, nowadays, they should all have multiple start times and the ability to program individual stations. In other words, you can program the lawn to come on for the 3 days of the week that we're allowed. You can program the trees and shrubs to come on once a week. And if you have a drip system that we'll talk about in a little bit, you can program your drip system to run 1 day a week for maybe an hour or more. Remember, the 10 minutes that we're talking about is for sprinklers. The drip systems are immune to most of these regulations. By the way, so is hand watering. So if you had potted plants and you needed to hand water them, or if you have a vegetable garden and you need to hand water it, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So if you need to install a new drip system or modify the one you have, Laura spoke briefly there about a program that the water district has where they'll actually pay you to take out your lawn. You can replace the lawn with drought-tolerant plants and drought-tolerant landscaping or artificial turf if you want. Typically, when you do that, you then remove sprinklers and valves, etc. But if you're going to install a new system, you'll need to draw a detailed plan and keep this slide for later use. It will be quite important for you. Okay, so the two major types of irrigation systems are the sprinklers, and that's the overhead typically used for turf, sometimes ground covers, and intensely landscaped areas with lots of plants close together. That's where overhead sprinkler systems are really at their best. That next line there about watering in gallons per minute. Sprinklers put out so much water, they do actually measure them in gallons per minute. In other words, a typical sprinkler that you see on your lawn shooting out water could put out as much as 4 gallons in a minute. That's a lot of water. So when we're telling you that 10 minutes is how long you should water, well, each of your sprinklers in that 10-minute period could be putting out 40 gallons of water. Okay? With drip irrigation, the nice thing about that is we can run the drip right to the individual plants, and it's virtually no runoff and very little evaporation. You do have to monitor a drip system. In other words, when it's on, you should walk the system. It'd be nice if you could do it once a week, but certainly a monthly. Walk the system, make sure nothing's plugged, make sure the system's coming on, make sure you can see water coming out of the emitters. With these drip emitters, the water is measured in gallons per hour, not minutes, but gallons per hour. So if you think about it, go back to that single sprinkler that's putting out 40 gallons of water in 10 minutes, 40 gallons. We go to one of our emitters that's putting out 1 gallon per hour. In 10 minutes, we're getting about a pint, not 40 gallons, but about a pint. So much less water is coming out, and we're putting the water right where it's needed. So the minute you install drip irrigation, you're saving water immediately. Now, there are different types of sprinkler heads. You've got really large lawns, like a park. In parks, you would see that type of impact sprinkler. It's a great big sprinkler. It shoots water really far. And unfortunately, they tend to mist or give you a lot of evaporation. We did studies on this in college, and we would find out that on a hot, rainy day, sometimes up to 80% of the water that came out of those impact type sprinklers would be evaporated, only 20% soak into the ground. So as a rule, in our lawns, in our yards, we have pop-up sprays. They pop up 2 inches, 3 inches, or 4 inches, pretty common. And they shoot the water from anywhere from 8 feet to 15 feet, typically. And in so doing, there's not quite as much misting and quite as much as evaporation as those impact type sprinklers. Then there are the shrub heads or stationary heads. The picture there shows you an old Champion brass sprinkler. That's left over a remnant from the 50s, believe it or not, because they don't pop up very far. And most of us have these tall fescue lawns that will grow 3 or 4 inches tall, and with a pop-up that only goes up about 1.5 inches, difficult to water the lawn properly. But the stationary or shrub heads are perfectly fine for watering flower beds, vegetable gardens, areas where we don't necessarily need a pop-up. Then there are bubblers, and bubblers are excellent for an individual tree or close grouping of plants. Bubblers do just that. They don't shoot water up in the air, so there's very little misting and very little evaporation. And they put a large amount of water right at the base of our plants. Now, drip irrigation, of course, this is the most precise means of watering. because it puts the water out at a slow rate, as we mentioned, gallons per hour instead of gallons per minute. So you use less water right away, and it's applied only where it's needed. There's little or no runoff. You reduce the number of weeds because you're putting the water at the root zone. You're typically not watering areas where there are no plants. Lower flow rates required. What that means is that if you're tapping into your irrigation system, you may need to put on a pressure regulator. But these systems are very easily attached into standard irrigation systems. But we'll talk a little bit about that. It is good to put your drip system above ground so that you can see it operating. So this means basically no trenching. You don't have to lay any wires, just the tubing. And the whole system is just, there's no glue involved. It's just compression fittings. So quite simple. The disadvantage of drip is the maintenance. You can see your sprinkler system working. You can see water coming out of the sprinklers. You'll have to walk up to your drip emitters and see, as I mentioned, maintain them, see that they are in fact working. Drip doesn't work real well at spraying foliage. And you may say, well, why do I want to spray foliage? Well, believe it or not, spraying your foliage helps to wash off a lot of insects and a lot of diseases. Did you know that the major rose growers, they all use overhead watering? It helps to wash off powdery mildew and insects. So if you were under the belief that water on your leaves cause diseases, that's actually incorrect. And there are scientific studies, you can look them up, and they will tell you that washing off your plants, spraying the foliage, is actually a very good thing to do. It's what the rain does. Some of you might still remember what rain is. It does require additional equipment or different equipment than perhaps a standard sprinkler system. Filters to keep debris out from plugging the little emitters. And as I mentioned, pressure regulators, because drip systems operate on very low pressure. 25 to 30 PSI is great. Your sprinkler systems probably operate at about 50. Typically, the pressure regulator that's on your house or your kitchen and bathrooms is typically set at about 50. Drip systems are susceptible to rodent damage. Squirrels, I have seen squirrels and gophers chew on the emitters to get water. Well, that happens. There is a high potential for clogging, and thus the need for filtration. But that's not a big deal, easily overcome. Now, drip systems, there are some factors that you have to know. The maximum tubing length shouldn't be much more than 300 feet. In fact, when you buy drip tubing, it comes in 50 or 100-foot lengths. And if you run different systems and each of them are 100 feet from the manifold, you'll never have any problems. The 300-foot length here refers to one length of tubing because there's only so much water that can travel through half-inch tubing. So, but that's not an issue. My entire yard is watered with drip irrigation, and I keep the lengths of the tubes to 100 feet or less, and everything does fine. Design the system for mature plant watering. In other words, a little tree, a tree that is perhaps got a root ball when you plant it that's no more than 15 inches wide. Well, obviously right now, 2 drippers, one on each side, out away from the trunk, is fine. But as the roots grow, the plant will need drippers further away. So keep that in mind. It's very easy to expand a drip system. Unlike a sprinkler system, we don't have to dig into the ground and add pipe or anything like that. We want to place water on at least 2 sides of the plants, and on bigger trees, 4 sides, all 4 sides. If you're on a slope, the emitters should be on the uphill side, and they should be placed underneath the canopy of a plant to ensure that the root zone gets watered. It will also reduce the evaporation. And don't place the emitters right up next to the plants. As I mentioned, if this is your plant, you probably want your emitters 6 to 12 inches away from the trunks of the plants, okay? Filtration is required. There are very nice, inexpensive filters that can be placed at the beginning of your system. And once installed, it'll filter the entire system. And every once in a while, you'll unscrew the filter and clean it out. The pressure regulators that I mentioned, if you're attaching to an existing sprinkler system, yes, your sprinkler system could be operating at a very high pressure. And in some cases, that high pressure may be too much for the drip and may even push some of the little drippers right out of the system. But the pressure regulators and the filters are relatively inexpensive pieces. You install them one time and they do the work for you for the rest of the time that you have the system. Just like I said, occasionally going and cleaning out the filter. So these are the main parts of your system. You see there's a valve there. Right next to the valve, built into the system there, is a strainer or filter, and then a pressure regulator. So there's 3 items there that you'd probably want for all 3. All 3 of those items would be necessary for a new system. If you already have the valve, then you'll just add the pressure regulator and the filter. Then from that point on, you attach the tubing and the emitters and the stakes to hold it in place. And then there are different conversion kits. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's actually 2 different ways to do this. One is to actually use the old sprinkler itself and attach a small manifold to it. The other is to remove the sprinkler and attach a little drip manifold to the riser. That's a very easy way to do it. That way you don't have to dig up any of your piping or anything. You use your existing sprinkler system, you use the risers and everything else, and you tap off of that. This is an example of tapping off an existing sprinkler or a riser. You can put the tubing in and run it where you need it. You can see that they've used a T there to tee off, an end cap there to end the water, and a stake to hold the stake in place. In the center picture there, you'll see water dripping out of the tube itself. This is called emitter tubing, where the emitters are built in to the tubing. This is a great way to go. This is my preferred method. But if your plants are spaced too far apart, if you just have a few plants in the yard, individual tubes going to individual plants with emitters would be the way to go. So here's a what they call a Y strainer, okay, and this is a filter, and nowadays they actually have filters that are quite small, about 6 inches long and maybe 1 inch wide, that can be installed, typically at your valve. Okay. Now, we're going to go back here for a minute to the sprinklers, the lawn sprinklers. It's very important that the water be applied evenly. And the best way to find out if you're getting even watering is to take some clear drinking cups and place them out on the lawn, and then turn the sprinklers on, and then go out and look in the cups, and you'll see if you're getting a uniform amount of water in each cup. If you don't, then you may have a problem. You may have a broken sprinkler head, or a sprinkler head that's not operating properly, which you can easily replace. Or it may have just been designed improperly at the beginning. That head-to-head coverage simply means that this sprinkler here shoots over to this sprinkler here. This sprinkler does not water near it. It puts the water a distance away. So we need a sprinkler over here to shoot that way, and a sprinkler here to shoot this way. That is called head-to-head coverage. Very important. Now, it is great if you could just use one brand of sprinkler, one type of head. If you attempt to use rotary heads with stationary heads, it won't work too well, because rotary heads conserve water by actually putting out less water during the runtime, and the stationary heads put out more water. So a rotor running for 10 minutes is going to put out a little less water than a stationary sprinkler in 10 minutes. Also, mixing different brands, Toro or Rainbird, together, not a great idea. It's great to have just one type, and one reason is in case you have to replace the sprinkler heads, it's good to know what you have, okay? And then sometimes sprinklers get hit by lawnmowers or stepped on, and they get tilted, pushed down too far, and then the water is no longer spraying as far as it needs to. And then the plants blocking the water. I think you've all seen that. The sprinkler system is installed, everything's very nice. Plant is planted next to the sprinkler for the first year, it's fine, but then the plant grows up and all the water hits that one plant, and that one plant probably dies, root rot, and the rest of the plants probably don't get the water they need. Another problem could be low pressure or high pressure. High pressure leads to that misting that we were talking about, where the water just comes out and floats away. Low pressure would come from having too many sprinklers on one line. It's a pretty common problem. And then your sprinklers won't shoot as far as they were designed. So this is what the uniform distribution looks like. Okay? Nothing is perfect, but you can see on the bottom one there that the water is not getting to those plants there that are turning yellow. And that could be from any of the reasons that we discussed up here. So now, spacing your sprinklers. If your sprinklers are designed to shoot 20 feet, then you place them every 20 feet. Very simple. If your sprinklers are designed to shoot 15 feet, you place them every 15 feet. The system on the left is just a mess. That would be very hard to deal with because you're mixing different types of sprinklers, different distances of sprinklers, and your coverage will probably never be great. And then here, as I mentioned, don't mix sprinkler types. You're seeing the standard sprinklers, and then you're seeing the rotors. It just won't work right. It might seem like a great idea if you needed to get more water to a particular area, but when we're only supposed to water 10 minutes at a time, it would be best if we were using all the same type of sprinkler. Then here's an example where they're still using sprinklers. There's a sprinkler right there next to the sidewalk. And then they've also put in drip. Well, that's wonderful. But as we discussed, watering with drip irrigation for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or even 10 minutes doesn't put out that much water. Your sprinkler will. The sprinkler will put out plenty of water, as we've discussed, in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes. So I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish with this particular setup, but it's not something we would recommend. Now we talked about the lawnmowers or the pedestrians or the bicycles hitting the sprinklers. And this is what happens. They'll tilt just slightly. That's enough. That's enough to cause the sprinkler not to operate as it was designed. And then this is an example of using a sprinkler that's not popping up far enough. I showed you that brass champion sprinkler. Well, that's probably what we see right here in this picture. If our grass is going to grow 3 to 4 inches tall, which is what it should, and our sprinkler is only popping up 1.5 inches, that's not so good. That's why nowadays, most new sprinkler installations, they use 4-inch pop-ups to make sure that they get as high as the lawn is going to grow. And then here's that misting or fogging that we were talking about. And this yard has very high water pressure. And you can see what happens when they turn the sprinklers on. Just massive amounts of water going up into the air. That water going up into the air isn't going into your yard. It's not going down into your lawn. It's going up into a cloud somewhere. And it's not helping us. So in this case, reducing the pressure would help out immensely. And then here's something that the city really wants to avoid. And this is using sprinklers that are shooting water further than they need to. And they're watering the sidewalk to no avail. Unfortunately, when most of Southern California was developed, it was developed with the thought in mind to catch every drop of water and immediately send it into a cement channel down to the LA River and get it out to the ocean. This has proved to be a very foolhardy thing. We really need to save all of that water and conserve all of that water and avoid runoff at all costs. So the city may send you a letter, or your HOA may send you a letter if they see this kind of thing going on. So how often should plants be watered? Well, depends. Depends on a lot of different factors. The depth of the roots. Tree roots are bigger and deeper than turf. So if you're watering an individual tree, you'd want to water for a longer period of time than you would want to water for turf. When you plant a tree in the middle of your lawn, well, don't have much to tell you, because you have to water your lawn to keep it green, and you may not be watering the tree as deeply, and you're certainly watering the tree much more frequently than it needs to be watered. Also, the type of soil you have. A sandy soil, the water is going to penetrate faster, as we mentioned, whereas a clay soil can hold the water. People complain about having heavy soils or clay soils, and truthfully, it's not fun to work in. But clay soils or heavy soils hold water for a longer period of time. The plants can go for much longer lengths of time in between watering if your soil is heavy or a clay soil. Now also the season. And I think we all know that the summertime here, the weather is intolerable. The sun is up for a longer period of time, and plants transpire. They use water at a higher rate. And if we get those Santa Ana winds, of course, this year, I've had Santa Anas, but we have had wind almost every single day. This was the windiest April in recorded history. March is normally windy. We know that. But this year, it continued through April and even the beginning of March. You've probably all heard of the fires down there in Orange County last week. That was because of the winds, the unseasonal, very high winds that normally don't occur at this time of year. So your water schedule will have to vary with the season and the type of plant. We would love to get you to plant native plants or plants with low water requirements. They don't all have to be California natives. They could be native to other areas of the globe that have the same sort of weather conditions and climate as us. Okay, now the optimal watering time is early morning. 6 a.m. is ideal. As we get into the winter, we want to push that back or up a little bit more. The sod growers, the people that grow grass for a living, they recommend watering during the summer, spring and summer, between say 6 and 8. But then in the winter, from October through March, perhaps a little later, maybe 8 to 9. And that's because the sun comes up a little later. We want to put the water there right before or right as the sun is coming up. Plant transpiration is low during that time. Watering in the late afternoon or early evening is about the worst time. We just don't want to do that. I think when you get your letter from the water department, they're going to suggest either early morning or night. And then watering, between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. There's going to be more water loss, plain and simple. And lower water pressure too, as people are doing laundry, showering, etc. Oops, what happened there? Oh. Okay, I think that was our last slide. So Laura, I'm gonna tag you back in and we'll see if we've got any questions from the audience.
Yeah, so there is a question. It's what is a good treatment for trees that I can use when they have mildew on their leaves, for example, to the rose trees? Is it because of overwatering? Thanks.
No, mildew is a fungal disease, and fungal diseases are tiny spores that blow in the wind. All they need is the right plant, call it a host plant, and proper environmental conditions. And the proper environmental conditions for powdery mildew are cool nights and warm days. And that's exactly what we've had. So powdery mildew is worse in the spring, not bad at all during the summer, and then in late fall becomes an issue again. Uh, so there's no real good environmental way to avoid powdery mildew. I did mention that rose growers um, water overhead to help wash off some of the spores. But the other thing is to just use a spray. There are a number of sprays, safe sprays to use that will control the powdery mildew during the mildew season. Laura, I can't hear you. Something happened.
I was muted. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to know how much time is ideal to set a drip sprinkler for plant roses hydrangea?
Well, hydrangeas are a shade plant, and they're a thirsty plant. Roses are a sun-loving plant and aren't nearly as thirsty. So I would not water my roses as frequently as I would a hydrangea. I would water the hydrangea as often as needed. And a hydrangea is the type of plant that will tell you. You can water it and then wait a few days and see how it looks. A hydrangea will actually begin to wilt or lay down. And then it'll tell you, okay, I can't go 3 days without water. I can't go 4 days, whatever the distance is. Now, a rose, on the other hand, I water my roses once a week and they thrive. Some people water them twice a week and they do well with that. So a rose and a hydrangea are two opposite ends of the spectrum and need to be watered differently and treated differently. Okay.
With an established sprinkler system, do I need to rebuild the valves to use drip system, or is it okay to put filters and regulators down on the line?
Yeah, you can use the regulators and filters further down the line, or you could put the pressure regulator. If that valve is being used strictly for drip irrigation, you can do it right there at the valve. You keep the valve on, you don't have to take the valve off, but you can apply or put the pressure regulator and the filter right at the valve or further down the line. These systems, these drip systems have really come a long way in the last few years, and they do have small plastic regulators that are maybe 3 to 4 inches long that can be installed in line. And I already mentioned that they have the filters that can be installed in line. So it can be done either location.
Okay, thank you. For individual vegetable plants, I have seen videos of one emitter right at the base of each plant. You indicated generally 2 emitters, one on each side. Which is best?
Well, vegetable plants are very small plants, short-lived plants. We grow them for 4 months and take them out. A single emitter may be fine for an individual plant, individual small plant like a vegetable plant. A single emitter may be fine for a petunia or a marigold. In other words, these are small annual plants. They're not permanent plants. When we're talking trees and shrubs, we're talking permanent plants, plants that are going to be there for years. A vegetable plant is just an annual plant. It's going to be there for a short period of time, and then we're going to take it out and replace it. So yes, I'm quite certain you can get away with 1 emitter per vegetable. Okay. Go ahead.
We have another question. How often should I water dwarf citrus trees only 2 years old?
Once a week in the summer, and then about every 2 weeks during the rest of the year as needed. But once again, I hope you all remembered or wrote down the very first things I told you the very first slide that I showed you. Do you remember those 4 words? Laura, do you remember them? Water
Deeply, water deeply, not infrequently.
deeply but infrequently.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
very good. Okay, very important. So do that with your citrus tree. Water the entire root system quite well, and then walk away from it. The number 1 cause of citrus failure is watering too frequently. The number 1 cause of yellow leaves on your citrus is water too frequently. Now, if your plant is in a pot, please forget everything I just said, because plants in containers need to be watered on their own schedule. Okay.
Okay, what about for a newly installed citrus tree? 2 emitters would be good.
Okay, I'm sorry, one more time.
For a newly installed citrus tree, 2
Newly-
drip emitters.
2 emitters might be okay for a new citrus tree. 2 would probably be fine. 4 would be excellent. 4 would be excellent. Now, the other advantage of adding 4 sprinklers, 4 emitters, is then perhaps we don't have to run the system for an hour. Maybe we could run it for 15 minutes and get a thorough amount of water to the root system. Okay.
Perfect. So somebody's asking, I heard the city has given out controllers and sensors in the past to help homeowners conserve water. Is there still a program like this, or will there be one in the future? You can go ahead and call or go on our website. I believe we are giving out in the kit a moisture sensor, but you would have to go on our website to check that out and request your kit. But we do have, you know, the $150 rebate for smart irrigation controllers. Those usually have moisture meters, and they can tell you they only water when it's necessary. So check that out too. Okay, next question for you, John. I noticed that my pygmy leaves turning yellowish. What is the cause?
I presume they're talking about a pygmy date palm. And if they're watering more than once a week, once again, it could be watering too frequently. Remember, palms are native to areas with sandy soil, so the water dissipates quickly. Out here in Santa Clarita, some of us have very heavy soils, and the water doesn't leave quickly. So if your plant is yellowing, chances are you've got a heavy soil and it's just too much moisture. Now, also keep in mind that the old fronds on a palm turn yellow before they fall off. So it just depends where your yellowing is. Okay.
All right. I don't see any more questions coming in. So I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you, John, for all your wisdom. I do want to remind everybody we do have a class next month on June 11th, where we will be discussing, sorry, I should have, little bit irrigation as well. So please tune in, sign up, and I hope to see you next month.
And you might want to remind everybody that if they are looking for drip irrigation parts, there's a nursery in town called Green Thumb Nursery that has a pretty good supply of drip irrigation parts.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you, John, for that.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Have a
Hey,
great
thanks.
weekend.
Thank you and goodbye. Thank you, Laura.
No problem.